my man, Caleb Maupin. How you doing, Caleb? You doing okay today?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I am doing well. I am doing well. I think I'm dragging a little bit of ass, but I'm doing okay otherwise. Caleb Maupin. He is a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author, director of CPI, Center for Political Innovation, an active organization that goes out pushing political issues, trying to bring sides together, something that is a worthy cause. Caleb, it was funny. I think you were on the show, I think it was maybe time before last, and you were talking about, I believe you were talking about, oh, what is his name? I can't believe his name dropped out of my mind. The one that recently got shot, that they were using all of this political hay over.
Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk. And there was somebody in the chat who was like, does anybody else feel bad about, about trashing Kirk after the conversation with Caleb? You were trying to make this point of saying, look, like the things that bring us together or the things that we all care about breach political divides. And oftentimes there's a lot of stuff that's seeded into our media in order to drive people apart and to resist those urges of being pulled apart in those ways. No, it's a worthy objective. It's a worthy cause. I brought you on. I wanted to talk about Venezuela because I don't think we are looking at a bluff. It seems like we're looking at something that is more than a bluff at this point. The New York Times, I believe it was also the Wall Street Journal, pointed out that there was a secret, potentially secret, and Maduro said this wasn't true, but a secret conversation between Maduro and Donald Trump. Maduro said, I'd leave in 18 months. Donald Trump said, that's unacceptable. You need to leave immediately, or else, effectively, we're going to murder a lot of Venezuelans. Give me your take on this. Just let's, a summation, and we can step into it after the summation. This is obviously grotesque and over the top. And like, this is a Monroe Doctrine in a way that we haven't seen in a very long time.
I mean, this looks to me like an administration that is completely incompetent and doesn't know what it's doing. Because, I mean, they have been building up and building up. And generally in warfare, you want the element of surprise. You don't want your enemy to be prepared. And they have been building up and building up and threatening and threatening and threatening. And that led many people to the conclusion that maybe they won't do anything because they've just built up and built up and built up if they haven't done anything. And it seems to me that there are people in the administration who don't want to strike Venezuela, and there are people in the administration who really do. And it looks like those forces that really do haven't given up. And, you know, I mean, I've heard the reports, same reports that you've heard. They say strikes are going to happen later this week. And yeah, I mean, it's awful. It's an awful situation. I mean, I'm horrified by the whole thing. What I find to be amusing about the whole thing is that Venezuela is far less isolated than they would be if there was a Democrat in the White House. There's widespread support for them in Colombia and, you know, South America. Europe even is opposing strikes on Venezuela. So the United States is going to be isolated if it goes ahead and strikes Venezuela. It's going to be completely isolated. There's going to be widespread sympathy and support for Venezuela. I mean, the whole situation is going to further isolate the United States. It's going to make Venezuela much more loved internationally. And I think on some level, Trump is trying to perform. He's trying to, you know, get points with the neocon crowd that is angry with him about the Ukraine war ending and, you know, the negotiations with Ukraine. And he's saying, well, okay, fine. But look what I'm doing in Venezuela. Look, I'm trying to do something here. And I mean, it's all just a big mess. It's absolutely a disaster. And I look at the situation. Maduro is not isolated. He's walking the streets of Caracas. He's got widespread support, right? He's ready to fight. He's not isolated at all. I mean, the United States is going to hurt its international image by doing this. I feel like Trump is under the impression that attacking Venezuela or getting Maduro to leave or something like that is going to win him points with somebody. And it's like, it's going to win him points with a very, very narrow constituency of like Pentagon war hawks. It's not going to really win him points with the U.S. public. It's not going to win him points internationally. The whole situation is very, very unfortunate. I'm very opposed. And that's CPI. We've been out in the streets. Our members were in Venice Beach. They were out, you know, hitting the streets of Venice Beach with, you know, hands off Venezuela. We disrupted the No Kings rallies to say hands off Venezuela. We are with Venezuela 100%. I mean, this is absolutely unconscionable. This shouldn't be happening. The USA should not strike Venezuela, and I hope that there's still a chance they won't. Right? I hope that cooler heads will prevail and de-escalation will take place. And I understand that there's Wagner military people there, right? Military contractors from Russia. I understand they've got a lot of Chinese tanks. They've got a lot of Chinese airplanes. They're ready to fight back. And I'm seeing reports that Venezuela could retaliate in ways that could actually hurt the United States. That's kind of being underestimated. People expect that Venezuela will just take it, right? They'll get a hit and then it'll be bad and they'll just take it. But I'm seeing reports that they could actually retaliate in ways that could really seriously harm the United States. Now, if there's actually some kind of ground invasion of Venezuela, we're looking at an all-out war that's going to be disastrous. But whether or not there's strikes or whether or not this is just a giant bluff still has to be seen. I think the White House doesn't know what it wants to do and is very confused, and that Trump wants to look good more than anything. I think that's Trump's primary concern, is how can he look good here? And he's kind of in a situation where he can't look good. I mean, there's really no way out of this for him to look good. And it's similar to the Ukraine situation. No matter how he responds, no matter what he does, he's going to look bad. Now, with Ukraine, Trump has the out now of the corruption investigation, right? Ukraine has been stealing and pilfering our taxpayer money. So if they try to say poor Ukraine, he can say, look, they were stealing our money, right? And his base, America First, taxpayer money, we're being robbed, Department of Government Efficiency. Trump has kind of an out with Ukraine, which is the corruption scandal. He can use that to cover himself. When they make him look like the most heartless, poor guy, heartless guy who just doesn't care for those poor Ukrainians, he can say, look, they were stealing our money. They stole billions of dollars worth of our tax money. They were robbing us. There was a scam going on. Sam Bankman-Fried. What else do you want to, so that gives Trump an out there with Ukraine. Plus, he can emphasize jobs, right? Now, Kirill Dmitriev was given the Chamber of Commerce Award in Russia. They had the Thanksgiving Gala in Moscow with the American Chamber of Commerce honoring Kirill Dmitriev. It looks like part of ending the Ukraine war will be a huge inflow of Russian investment into the United States, possibly seeing this Bering Sea tunnel created and such. And so Trump has kind of an economic out when it comes to Ukraine. Venezuela, he's kind of in a situation where if he backs down, he's going to look weak. And so they're going to attack him on that. If he does something, though, it's going to be disastrous. It's not going to have good results, and it's going to isolate the United States internationally. And Maduro is going to get way more support than he would normally be getting. So with Venezuela, Trump is in a situation where there's no way out of this for him to look good. And I think that's really what a mess this is. It's not good at all.
Yeah, I don't know how you back away after putting this much military armaments in this area. I mean, well, there are a few things that are bizarre, right? Pardoning Hernandez, there's that. Drug lord from Honduras. You're pardoning him, and then you're going after Venezuela, saying that Maduro is, I guess, a drug kingpin, sending drugs to the United States. Okay, nobody believes that, right? And so these two things are happening simultaneously, which looks utterly just bizarre. On top of that, the conversation with Maduro is fascinating to me. Should Maduro walk to avoid a war?
No, because that would set a precedent that wasn't good. And I
agree.
At the same time, there's no reason. Maduro is wildly popular. And I keep seeing articles in the mainstream press that are like bizarre. Have you seen, there's Axios and others are running claims. Well, Maduro won't leave because his Cuban handlers won't let him go, won't let him step down. Well, if that's the case, then shouldn't you be mad at Cuba? Shouldn't you be putting pressure on Cuba then? They can't get their stories straight, right? The whole thing is just preposterous. Maduro is the leader of the Bolivarian movement, right? The Bolivarian movement. Where did this Venezuelan government come from? It came from during the late 80s and early 90s, Venezuela was hit with all kinds of crazy austerity. The cost of living went up. The cost of public transportation went up. You had the Caracazo, which was a huge rebellion, a riot against the cost of public transportation and the cuts that were going on. And, the electricity was going off because of the cuts in public spending, and the garbage wasn't being collected. And a mass movement against austerity was created, against neoliberalism was created. And the Communist Party was part of it, but so was the Catholic Church. And so were a lot of indigenous organizations and all kinds of people. And there was kind of a mass movement against cuts in public spending, and a paratrooper, a kind of populist paratrooper who was a little bit bit of a fringe politician until then, named Hugo Chavez, became the face of that mass movement. And he got elected. And then when he got elected, there were mudslides in the country. And he mobilized the public to go out and help the people with the mudslides. And he got on TV and he used the military to help the people with the mudslides, something that had never been done before. But this military leader used the military to help with the mudslides, built kind of a popular movement, and people were very inspired. They passed a new constitution, and he was very popular. And then they tried to overthrow him in a military coup in 2002. And the rank and file soldiers rose up and brought Hugo Chavez back to power. And at that point, they announced their goal was to create 21st century socialism. And that's where this movement comes from. And Maduro is a bus driver, a leader of the bus drivers unions, right? He's somebody who's been part of these movements for a long time. A couple of years ago, I was sitting in the home of a Honduran writer that I was friends with. And I was sitting in his home, and the Venezuelan consular of New York was sitting in the home as well. We were having coffee. And I asked her about different political parties in Venezuela. And I remember I asked her, I said, what do you know about Partido Bandera Roja, or the Party of the Red Flag in Venezuela? Yeah. And she said, well, I used to be on the national committee of it. And so was Nicolas Maduro. And at that time, I didn't know who Nicolas Maduro was. I knew Hugo Chavez, who was president. I said, who's Nicolas Maduro? She said, he's the vice president, right? He's the vice president of the country. She said, now the Partido Bandera Roja is a pretty, is kind of just a far left kind of isolated group. But at one point, Partido Bandera Roja, or the Party of the Red Flag, was an attempt to build a more radical communist party. And Nicolas Maduro was on the national committee of it. He was a leader of the bus drivers union. He was somebody who knew a lot about communism and had studied Marxism and had been to the Soviet Union in different places. And he was just this leader who was part of that movement. And I remember when Hugo Chavez died, many times he said, after I die, vote for Nicolas Maduro. And he made that very clear. Nicolas Maduro is my successor. And after Hugo Chavez died, the people went out and they listened to what Hugo Chavez said, and they voted for Nicolas Maduro. There is disagreement, or was a lot of disagreement, I should say, in the Bolivarian camp after the death of Hugo Chavez. There was a feeling that the Bolivarian movement might go in different directions. But then the USA put all kinds of pressure on the country and created a food crisis in the country. And, there were all these coup attempts and all that. And now Nicolas Maduro is like the symbol of Bolivarianism. They actually, it's funny, there was, I would say a lot more disagreement about Maduro's leadership of Bolivarian socialism and the mass movement in Venezuela before all this happened. But now that Nicolas Maduro has become the face, and it's all about we hate Maduro, get Maduro out, now they're solidly lined up behind Maduro, actually, right? Now it's kind of like how, in various countries, people always ask, there's a lot of confusion about this, but like take North Korea, for example. This is a country that's technically still at war with the United States. They've been at war with the United States since the 1950s. There was an armistice, but there was never a peace treaty. The USA has no diplomatic relations with them, right? And after Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, died, they put Kim Jong-il into power. He became the new leader. Why? That was to make a statement. They said, we're still the same country. We are still the same country. Because there was all these rumors of, there's going to be market reforms, and they said they put Kim Jong-il as the leader to say we are still the same country. And then after Kim Jong-il died, they put Kim Jong-un into power. Why? To make the statement that this is still the same country, right? The lineage continues, right? Kim Il-sung was the George Washington or the Ho Chi Minh of the Korean Peninsula. He was the leader of the anti-Japanese resistance during World War II. And in the lead up to World War II, he was an outlaw, a hero, right? His name means Kim becomes the sun, right? It's like a cowboy name, right? Like the Sundance Kid, or I'm trying to think of like Pretty Boy Floyd or something like that. It's an outlaw name he took on, right? It's Robin Hood. He's basically the name Kim Il-sung was the equivalent of Robin Hood, right? And he was a legendary figure in Korea that was known for robbing the rich and giving to the poor. And he became the leader of the Korean resistance to Japan. He became the symbol of the resistance. And so after Kim Il-sung died in the early 1990s, they made Kim Jong-il the leader, and now Kim Jong-un, to make a statement that we are not surrendering and we are continuing the legacy of the revolution. That's Maduro now. Now he's the symbol of the revolution. He may not have been that in the immediate aftermath of Hugo Chavez's death. In 2015, when I visited Venezuela, there was a lot of internal turmoil in the Bolivarian camp, a lot of disagreement, a lot of people who said, well, I'm for Chavez, but I'm not for Maduro. Not anymore. Now all this pressure has been placed on them Maduro is bad. Maduro stepped down. He's the symbol of their resistance. So Maduro is not going to step down, and they're going to continue to rally around Maduro. And the United States has really made big mistakes here. And I mean, it's unfortunate because if it wasn't for what the United States has done, the United States might have a seat at the table when it comes to Venezuela. But now at this point, the United States is acting like such a blatant aggressor and doing so in a way that they don't even have the support of Europe in doing it. That's what made Bush was very much opposed to Hugo Chavez. Obama was. And after the death of Hugo Chavez, Obama kind of rallied Europe and the international community, and they went after Venezuela. But now at this point, Trump is pretty isolated. Venezuela is getting all kinds of support. I mean, here we are. I don't see a way out of this that's going to benefit the United States internationally. I don't see a way out of this that is going to lead to a situation where the United States comes out the winner. Venezuela and Maduro are going to remain in power. The people of Venezuela will defend the revolution. The United States looks like it's in a situation where it may attack Venezuela, and as a result, it'll be further isolated.
Basically war. And because that's what we're talking about, right? If Maduro is saying, because what this boils down to is a horrible choice. This was the Evo Morales choice. And there were a lot of people who thought Evo Morales should have stayed and defended the country, basically fight back against the fascists that were backed by the West. And that is effectively the same situation that Maduro is being put into right now. Whereas Evo Morales decided to leave, the question becomes, okay, well, what does Maduro do? Is Maduro willing to?
Yeah, there's a big difference, which is the military. The Bolivian military was the regular militaries from before the revolution. They're the ones that ousted Evo Morales. Venezuela's military is trained in Cuba. The Venezuelan military has been completely changed. It's a completely different military, and the Bolivarian movement and the military are one, right? When you join the Venezuelan army, you get socialist education. The military, I would say, is more supportive of Maduro than the rest of the country is. Whereas in Bolivia, a lot of the military wasn't. So that's the difference. And that's the whole thing. If you read Lenin, the state and revolution, that's what he talks about. I mean, ultimately, the state is bodies of armed men at the end of the day, right? That's really who has the power. And in Venezuela, the state is solidly behind Maduro and the revolution. In Bolivia, the state was not. The state was still the old state left over. You had a popular movement, and there were probably a lot of people in the military who liked Evo Morales, but a lot of the military leadership were not on his side. Sorry.
I'm curious on
Sorry to
something
interrupt.
else.
Yeah.
No, you're perfectly fine. No, great explanation for it.
Yeah.
Cuba is one of the other things that people make a point of saying, that Venezuela apparently gives oil to Cuba or sells oil to Cuba, and that going after Venezuela is a gateway and going after Cuba. Do you accept that? That seems like a lot of wood to chop to get to Cuba.
Well, no, because the reason that we saw during Obama's second term, the USA amped up sanctions like crazy on Venezuela, but then Obama went to Cuba actually and lifted a lot of sanctions on Cuba, opened a U.S. embassy in Cuba. What was going on is that for a long time, especially like in the 70s and 80s, Cuba was viewed as the center of anti-imperialism in South and Central America, right? It was exporting the Cuban Revolution all over the region. All these rebel groups were getting support from Cuba. That's why Cuba was designated as a state sponsor of terror, because they were supporting various, movements that were fighting military dictatorships in Colombia and places like that. In Nicaragua, the Sandinistas were fighting, an actual U.S.-backed dictator, and they took power, right? And they were backed by Cuba. Mm-hmm. And but at this point, Venezuela is on the South American continent, and they have a huge amount of oil, and they are playing a much more important role. Cuba used to be kind of the fountainhead of anti-imperialism. Now Venezuela is. Cuba was no longer seen as much of a threat by the United States because they don't have oil and they're not actually on the South American continent. Venezuela was seen as much more of a threat. And that, the USA felt like, okay, well, Cuba, they have certain weaknesses, right? They have certain vulnerabilities because they depend on imports of oil, because, they produce their own food, but they have, limitations of products they have to import, whereas Venezuela is more of a threat. So, yeah, I just, the role that Cuba used to play in the 70s and 80s is now being played by Venezuela.
I see. So it's not about Cuba. It's about Venezuela specifically.
No.
Basically,
Yeah,
that's the issue.
yeah, Venezuela is more central, I think, at this point. Venezuela, if you look at in terms of the economy, in terms of where they're positioned, in terms of spreading anti-imperialism throughout the region, Venezuela is the target, not Cuba. Cuba has helped Venezuela, and Cuba has provided, especially in military matters, right? The Cuban military is really important. And let's just point this out. This is one thing they're never bringing up. What country has the most effective anti-drug policies of all of Latin America? Cuba, right? Cuba has no drug problem at all, according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency. So, I mean, if there's any argument for Venezuela not being a fountainhead of the drug issue, it's the fact that they're so close to Cuba, right? And that they have Cuban troops there, that they work with the Cubans. I mean, Cuba has no drug problem. And the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency and other officials have marveled at how effective Cuba's anti-drug policies are. There is no drug problem in Cuba because they have a society. They have social safety net. I mean, they have full employment. They have guaranteed health care. They have all of that. And on top of that, the military and the government and community organizations very effectively mobilize. The whole country is kind of unified in getting rid of the drug problem. There was a lot of drugs in Cuba before the revolution, and they completely got rid of it. In the early 90s, one of Fidel Castro's top generals was caught sitting down with drug cartels, and he actually was executed and got the death penalty in the 90s. And that was a really shocking moment. This was somebody who'd been like a founder of Cuba, and he was executed for drugs. And many people suspected that the USA was going to try and use drugs as an excuse to attack Cuba. And so to preempt that, Fidel executed one of his top generals who was sitting down with the drug dealers. Wow. And that was pretty wild. And this is, again, I do not understand this at all, right? We're legalizing marijuana. Marijuana is legal like all over the United States right now. The American public is against the war on drugs. The American people are not sitting down there saying, all right, let's invade some countries to deal with drugs. The opioid epidemic is certainly something that has devastated a lot of communities. But there's no one sitting there saying, all right, let's get Venezuela because they got some drugs. I mean, why is he using drugs to sell this? Like, this is weird. It's not a PR victory. I mean, no one's sitting there. It's like, with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, I understood it because 9/11 had just happened. They were scaring us all. There's going to be more 9/11s. We're all going to die. But I mean, who is sitting there saying, all right, there's too much cocaine and weed in my neighborhood. Let's invade Venezuela. No one's saying that. Like no one is saying that. There are a lot of people in I guess you could say Trump country, red states who've seen the impact of fentanyl in their country. But no one is saying fentanyl is coming from Venezuela. Fentanyl comes from Mexico. Fentanyl, fentanyl, it's synthetically created. You just have to have certain chemicals and you can make it. Most of it's made in the United States. They just get the chemicals from somewhere else. So, I mean, it's weird that they're even selling it this way. It's almost like they're trying to sell the war not to Americans and the U.S. public, but to like people within the state, like deep state actors who are horrified by what drug cartels do, or maybe like people in South America. Maybe there's like certain people, like military people in South and Central America who really hate the drug cartels, like they're trying to sell it to them. But it's not the American people, and it's not the international community. It's weird. It's very, very weird they're using the drug issue here. This is really strange marketing. I mean, I must say, it's like it's not winning them any public relations points.
Well, I think it's hubris of a hegemon. Like, they think that the American public would accept them going after Maduro, and they just need a thin fig leaf to do it. Meaning we get that this is nonsense. We get it. We don't care it's nonsense, but we're going to sell it using this fig leaf nonetheless. That's what it comes across as. I mean, I'm not sure. Look, there's some rando out there that believes this. I don't doubt it. Yeah. Like, there's going to be 5% of the population that says Donald Trump is fighting drugs by going after Maduro. I suspect a lot of people, though, look at it as Maduro's a bad guy, Maduro's a dictator, so if you remove Maduro, that's okay. Meaning, I don't know if it's heavier than that. It's that shallow, where the public just kind of sits back and accepts. I mean, granted, Hegseth apparently is getting pressure because apparently the double tap that murdered those fishermen. Okay, well, that is amazing to me by itself, right? For one, the idea that you attack those fishermen or the people who were in those boats is outrageous by itself. But then they're saying, well, the first strike is okay, but the fact that you hit it the second time, that's where we take issue with. What? was like the first strike wasn't okay. If you had the capacity to use military force in order to murder somebody in the boat, then you had also the military capacity to capture the person in a boat and capture the person with the drugs and prosecute. They are making an intentional display to murder the various people who are in those boats. Yeah, it's just wild to me. I understand your point. Your point is like this is one of the dumbest excuses that you would use to create some kind of regime change mechanism, and yet they're using it. And I guess my thing is, this seems to just be hubris.
And it's outdated. It's like in the late 80s, this was kind of a talking point. Noriega, right? The invasion of Panama, they used drugs as the excuse, right? And that was the age of just say no. You're my age, right? You remember Just Say No? You remember all that bullshit, right? I remember
they were doing it in schools. Yeah.
I will never forget, we had an anti-drug speaker came to our school, and he put up an image on the screen of Madame Curie, right? The chemist, right? And and he said, Madame Curie, she was not allowed in the National Academy of Sciences. Does anyone know why? This girl in the front row raises her hand. Because she did drugs? No, not because she did drugs. And someone else, because she's a woman? He's like, exactly. He's like, Madame Curie was not allowed in the National Academy of Sciences, but did she join a gang? No. Did she use drugs? No. All right. So neither can you. I remember sitting there and thinking,
what?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, so there you go. Madame Curie, she didn't join a gang. She didn't use drugs. So neither should you. Right. That was Just Say No. That was
that's so dumb.
Extremely. So dumb. It's extremely dumb. Yes. That was Dare. I mean, if any of us who grew up with that, I mean, it was so dumb. It was just
that. Yeah, I remember that. They used to do it in school. Nancy Reagan, Just Say No. That was the whole pitch. The DARE program in our middle school. Oh, God, man. I remember that stuff. That stuff was ubiquitous. It was all over the place. It obviously failed because marijuana is legal.
Yeah.
At the point in many of these states. Yeah. So from your point of view, this is going to be a war for all intents and purposes. I don't know how Trump backs out. I don't know how you save face and backs out. Maduro doesn't seem like he's going to leave, which he shouldn't. I mean, God, man, this is always a dichotomy because it's, okay, either you step down or you put your country through a war. Neither one of those are good solutions in the situation. And yet the war seems to be the thing where you have to defend the sovereignty of your state. I don't know another way out, frankly. I mean, maybe I'm missing something.
I mean, I assume that there's probably at least one faction of the Trump administration that is thinking like, how can we strike and say we did, but do the least damage as possible? Kind of like what they did with Syria. You remember after the chemical weapons attack, allegedly, right in Syria,
Obama,
right? When Trump was in during his first term, like he blew up an empty airport, and then he was like, "All right, I got him." Like there was that, right? It might be something like that. I'm curious.
I mean, he's effectively said that he's put him on the foreign terrorist organization list, Venezuela. And so it's like, okay, so you did a strike, Maduro's still in power, and then you have all of this military hardware that is in the Caribbean. You've been training troops in Puerto Rico who's been going through this jungle warfare stuff. And without accomplishing any of your objectives, you now pull out. How do you save face with that? See, that's the issue, right? It's you've hyped this thing up for the last several months, including up into murder.
Yeah, well,
and it's like, how do you back away?
There's an element, like you saw in the reports, like Trump wanted Maduro to come to the United States, right? You saw that, right?
That would be outrageous. Right. That would be outrageous. There's no way.
Maduro was like, no, I'm not going to do that because you've got a bounty out for me. I'll be arrested. And it's like on some level, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And apparently that was part of the goal of the conversation was Trump was like, I want you to come to the United States and we'll have a photo op together and all of this. And Venezuela was like, well, no, if you come to the United States, I'm going to be arrested. And like part of the Trump administration was hoping to get a photo op out of this. And the other half of the Trump administration is hoping for a regime change war. Like, this is bizarre. And I mean, the idea that was even discussed, like you do realize, like, you put a huge bounty on this guy's head. He's charged with all kinds of crimes and all this, but yet Trump is like, got the fantasy of like, well, maybe he can come to America and we can shake hands and take pictures together. And I'll go down in history as I mean, on some level, they don't even know what they're doing. Right. I mean, and it's like there's people in the Trump administration with very divergent goals. Let me put it that way, right? Let me put it that way. The fact that that would even be on the table, that anyone would even be talking about that at this point, it's like they don't know the circumstances. There's people, there's people on the White House team who are not familiar with the international circumstances and are just thinking in terms of public relations. There are people on the White House team that are just thinking in terms of international relations and are tied in with this Miami mafia that doesn't care about anything but regime change and fighting the Latin American left and fighting anyone who's aligned with Cuba. I'm seeing a lot of incompetence here. That's what I'm seeing.
What about other South American states? I mean, Colombia, Petro has been very loud in this. I guess all of them on some level know that any invasion of Venezuela is also some kind of exertion of power by the United States and the various other countries, not just Venezuela in and of itself. And the other thing is control. Like the moment that you invade Venezuela, either through airstrikes, trying to depose Maduro and everything else, what does the country look like at that point? Like, meaning you've fundamentally unraveled a society on some level the moment that you attack the country. That has to factor into the calculus, or does it from your point of view?
I mean, look at Honduras. In 2009, that was Obama's first coup. Obama had just come into office, and the Hillary Clinton State Department, without talking to Obama, had been talking with Michellette and the generals in Honduras, and they overthrew the Honduran president, Manuel Zelaya, and brought in chaos and death and destruction. And Honduras had, I believe it still has, one of the highest murder rates in the world. It's right up there with Haiti. And it was absolutely devastating. And what was wild about that coup is that Obama didn't seem to know what was going on. They asked Obama about it at a press conference, like right after it happened. And he said, well, that's not legal. You can't overthrow the government. And then, he was quickly told, oh, well, actually, we support the overthrow of the government. He didn't even really know what was going on. It was all Hillary Clinton who arranged the whole thing. Had been planning it since before Obama even took office. She'd been in touch with the generals and such, and she came into the State Department, and it was planned, and Obama didn't even know about it. And that was the Honduras coup, and that led to drug cartel insanity, chaos, all kinds of stuff. And Honduras has been having problems. And now I see Trump, speaking, he's interfering in Venezuela or in Honduran politics now. He's, taking sides and talking about who's who. And and it's like, let's look at the situation in Honduras. Honduras would be a much more stable country, if it wasn't for the fact that the USA violently overthrew the government and installed a chaos narco drug regime there in 2009. So, I mean, that's what set the stage for all of this, and that there is a mass social movement in Honduras that was against the coup that is backing up various anti-imperialists that are there. And during Obama's term, during Obama's presidency, he did, like, in Honduras and in Guatemala, they had two, like, fake revolutions where it was like the whole government stepped down and the people were out in the streets because of corruption and nothing changed. But it was like to make a statement, they had everyone go out and rebel, and it was all this. And then it was just like, see, we're coming together against corruption. The other thing that they did in Guatemala is they put, the former military dictator from Guatemala, Rios Montt, they put him on trial for massacring indigenous people. And they had a public trial for him where he was found guilty of genocide. And then they, let him off on a technicality. But it was very much a public relations stunt. It was to let the indigenous folks know, like, we hear you, we've heard you, we understand the horrendous things that were done to you in the 1980s, right? Yeah. And there was a lot of efforts by the US-backed organizations and Soros-backed organizations to have, like, truth and reconciliation and kind of look like, the population of Guatemala that suffered horrendously during the period of the military dictatorship, that they've been heard, that the crimes against them are being acknowledged. They really were trying to preempt something like Bolivarianism taking power in Honduras and Guatemala. And so Obama's whole thing was, we'll put Rios Montt on trial. We'll have a fake revolution. We'll do all of this to make sure that they don't, have a straight up, a real revolutionary movement. And that was that was kind of what was going on there. And that people even put the Pope's left turn in with that, right? The Pope, who was in office at the time, he was, kind of talking about, criticizing capitalism and having sentiments, for the migrants, and the Pope kind of took a left turn, and that was to kind of keep the Catholic Church in its position because, and this is where it gets really wild, in the 1980s, the Catholic Church was kind of sympathetic to some of the anti-colonial movements. The Nicaraguan, the Sandinistas had priests that were in the government and such, and it was Catholics, that were protesting in the United States against the USA sending weapons to death squads in El Salvador and such. And it was the School of the Americas, which was the military CIA training, that tended to be all evangelicals, right? Evangelicals who thought the Catholic Church was had lost its way or was in bed with communism or whatever, and the massacres of priests and nuns and all of that. Now in Latin America, it's kind of flipped. There are a lot of local Pentecostal ministers in Nicaragua and in Venezuela who are pro-Bolivarian. And that's something we don't know about in the United States. But, the Pentecostal church and a lot of the Protestant churches, there's no like hierarchy. They don't have to get permission from the Vatican. So the local minister sees that his congregation, their wages are going up. They're getting health care. They've got guaranteed jobs. They're paving new roads in the neighborhood. And he says, this looks good to me. And he likes the Bolivarian government. There are a lot of ministers and pastors from the Protestant, kind of Protestant fundamentalist tradition now in Venezuela and in Nicaragua that are supportive of the socialist governments there. Whereas the Catholic Church is now very solidly opposed. The Catholic Church was very involved in trying to destabilize Nicaragua. In Venezuela, the majority of the country is Catholic, but the Catholic Church is very anti-Maduro. And so it's kind of interesting to see how it's flipped, and so now, and that's one thing I was kind of blown away when I was in Venezuela in 2015. There are a lot of, religious, fanatical religious Protestants, I guess you could say, Pentecostals, Baptists, and others that are big supporters of Maduro. And you wouldn't know that. That just doesn't fit what we know about American politics. But, gay marriage is not legal in Venezuela. Abortion is not legal in Venezuela. And, it's quite a socially conservative country. Their socialism is very conservative, and religion is a really big part of the communist ideology there. That's one thing that I saw when I was in Caracas, is talking to the communists. It all gets back to, this is what Jesus would want. We're fighting for the downtrodden. We're fighting for the oppressed. There's a very, very religious overtone to the Marxist ideology that you hear from Bolivarian Marxists in Nicaragua and in Venezuela. The official slogan of the Sandinistas, the slogan that they have painted everywhere, it's like the official government slogan is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know that, right? Because because those countries are very, very Catholic historically, and because of liberation theology in the 1980s and all of that, the anti-imperialist like Marxism is very, very, very religious in the way it presents itself.
The way it feels. Last question. What do you make of something like Syrian takeover, where let's say the CIA gets involved, pays off military in order to, let's say, create an overthrow internally? I mean, because that's effectively what took place in Syria, right? You get all of this money that are flowing to various, let's say, military generals. You get threats that may be leveled at some of them. Some of them stand down in regards to fighting the war. Basically, you create a cancer from within in order to undercut the government itself. Or do you think the Bolivarian, let's say, ideological basis is resistant to that in a way that the Syrian government was?
Well, the problem, the big difference is in Syria, you had an armed opposition army that was very, very big, right? That could lay the basis for kind of a new state. In Venezuela, you don't have that. And as I pointed out before, the Venezuelan military is more supportive and more ideologically in support of Maduro than before. And there have been many coup attempts, and they just don't go through. There's nobody to carry out a coup. They've tried that. I mean, they've tried that before. So, an actual invasion where they fought the Venezuelan state, I mean, that would be an absolute disaster, but that could happen. Airstrikes, I mean, I think that's what it looks like is going to happen according to the reports that we're getting now. I really hope that is wrong somehow. I really hope that there's a change, but it seems like that's what is, all the signs seem to be pointing toward with the closing of the airspace, and now where Russian tourists are being evacuated. It looks like the USA is planning some kind of airstrike. That's what the Pentagon has said. I really hope that they don't do that. But that's kind of the situation we're in, and it's an absolute disaster. But I also, though, you have to remember Venezuela and Russia are quite close, and the United States and Russia are negotiating around the clock, right? And that factors into these
part
things
of the
as well.
negotiations. Yeah. I guess that's a good point. This may come up in negotiations. Caleb, great breakdown as always, man. I swear to God. Caleb Maupin, he's a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. He's director of CPI, Center for Political Innovation. Caleb, let the audience know some of your books.
Sure.
He's a prolific writer. Caleb writes all the time. Let him.
The Danger of an American Years of Lead. I don't know if you saw, but starting December 1st today, every member of Congress is now going to get $20,000 for their personal security. Did you see that?
I did not see that. Really?
Yeah. In July, it was $5,000. In September, they made it $10,000. Now today, $20,000 for personal security every month, right?
Imagine being that unpopular.
Yeah, because there's so much political violence now, with Charlie Kirk, with the assassinations that have happened, with Marjorie Taylor Greene stepping down. Political violence in the United States is on the rise. I view this as an intelligence strategy, and I compare it to the Years of Lead in Italy. So people should read what I wrote. I wrote this long before Charlie Kirk was killed. I wrote this about the Luigi Mangione case, and what I predicted was basically that we're going to see an upsurge of political violence as a way to control the narrative. And I wrote this book, and it's more true than I understood what was going on, and then it turns out to be even more true than I realized. So yeah, there you go. Check it out. The Danger of an American Years of Lead.
Caleb Maupin. Caleb, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
You too. Thanks.
Have a good one. Caleb, great breakdown by Caleb. Great breakdown. We have come to the end. We've come to the end. Let's go to chats before we close it. Kevin Wayne, BBC, quote, U.S. lawmakers demand answers over Hegseth Venezuela boat strike claims, unquote. That's laughable. I'm sorry, it's laughable. And I don't mean laughable in a positive way. I mean it in the most dramatic, negative way that I can think of. They have murdered like 80 people in boats. Boats, by the way, that couldn't even get to the United States in many respects. Boats that if you have a military strength that's in the Caribbean, you can apprehend, capture, get the drugs, and prosecute. In one of the cases, or maybe even more, they destroyed a boat. The people lived, they captured the people, and then released the people because people were effectively innocent. And so you have a double tap on a boat where they hit a boat illegally and then hit it again in order to make sure that the people were murdered. It goes to Trump. Trump is like, I don't know anything about it. And even distances himself from Hegseth, effectively saying, hey, look, I don't believe in murdering people if they can't fight, etc. Hegseth releases the statement, hey, we're not in the business of just murdering people if they can't fight. Well, none of these people can fight. You're in a fishing boat and they blow up the boat. So even the very premise that Hegseth is running with of, well, we're not in the business of attacking people who can't necessarily defend themselves. Well, you were attacking people who couldn't defend themselves, and we're effectively just murdering civilians and innocent people. There's that. They don't take issue with the murders. They take issue with the fact that it was a double tap. What the hell, right? How do you not take issue with the basis by which Trump is doing this? As opposed to taking issue with, well, you blew up the boat, that's fair game, but the fact that you murdered the people after you blew up the boat and the people were still alive, that's what we take issue with. It's like, are you being serious? Are you being serious right now? So yeah, they're claiming that they're looking into it in an investigation. I won't hold my breath. I won't hold my breath. I put it that way. Aether, what is it? Blue? Aether Blue? Welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. President Jafar, Donald Trump is calling Maduro a narco-terrorist while pardoning narco president from Honduras. Ain't that some shit? Ain't that some shit? Trump wants to reestablish drug lines in South America. Who says those drug lines were ever gotten rid of? President Jafar. I mean, keep in mind that CIA was drug running at one point. And I mean, at this point, I think it's just well known that CIA was drug running. Yeah, pardoning Hernandez. Pardoning Hernandez. Like I said, ain't that some shit? Ain't that some shit? The single tap was bad enough. Yeah, Alexandra Black. Yes, that's the part that should have been illegal, right? The African American guy who stepped down, he stepped down because it was illegal, and he understood it was illegal, right? If indeed Trump is correct, you have a massive military contingent in the Caribbean. You have speedboats that would have to be refueled like 8 times in order to get to the United States. I don't know who the hell is going to be in a speedboat going all the way to the US, but whatever. Any of these people could be apprehended. Any of them can be apprehended. You have an overwhelming amount of force in this situation. But that's not what they're doing. And it's not what they're doing because they know that they're lying through their teeth about it. So there's that. All right. We've reached the end. We've reached the end. Guys, I always tell you, you can support this content. You can like the video. You can share the video. You can support this content, especially if you find yourself coming back here often and you dig what we are putting down on a daily basis through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Buy Me a Coffee, memberships. Shout out to Aether Blue. Welcome to the family on that one. Super stickers. I don't know why they have super stickers and super chats. I don't know the difference between those things, with the exception of leaving comments, but whatever. Both of those things are available. All of those things help support the work. All of those things help support the content. I really want to get a producer, and part of that requires growth and assistance from the show itself. So, but I'm going to call us a day. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Tomorrow, Margaret Kimberly is going to be on the show. Laith Maruth is going to be on tomorrow since he wasn't on Friday. And I'm trying to get John Helmer to break down the Witkoff-Putin meeting that's supposed to take place tomorrow. So we'll see. Hopefully he's responded to me by now. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be on Revolutionary Blackout Network in the morning. Well, it's my morning, your evening. It's going to be at 7:45, 7:30. It's going to be at 7:30 tomorrow on Revolutionary Blackout Network. I'm saying tomorrow because it's tomorrow for me. It's in the morning for me. It's an evening for you guys. So it's going to be 7:45 Eastern, or 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. For me, it's 6 in the morning. So that should be badass. I don't think I've ever been on their show, to be honest. So it'll be an experience. But you all have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one all. Be safe and be kind to the degree. Look, I know I quantify that because I feel it's more honest to say to the degree that you can be kind. That's why I quantify it. But be safe and be kind to the degree that you could be kind. Don't be a doormat. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Have a good one all. Thank you for joining.